I was cutting into my second helping of turkey when my mother looked directly at me across our Thanksgiving table and said the words that would change everything. "Willie, I think it's time you leave this house and stop relying on this family for everything." The dining room went completely silent. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth, loaded with stuffing and cranberry sauce. Dad's hand froze around his water glass. My sister Melody dropped her napkin. Even her husband Brad stopped chewing mid-bite. I sat there staring at Mom, realizing she had absolutely no idea that I had been secretly paying their mortgage, covering all their utilities, and even handling Melody's student loan payments for the past 3 years. Without saying a word, I quietly placed my fork on my plate and stood up from the table. The silence stretched across our dining room like a heavy blanket. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all just watched as I walked over to the corner where I had left my laptop bag earlier that morning. I could feel their eyes following my every movement as I unzipped the main compartment and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. I returned to the table and began spreading papers across the polished wood surface, gently pushing aside the serving dishes Mom had spent all morning arranging. Bank statements, payment confirmations, loan documents, receipt after receipt after receipt. The family watched in growing bewilderment as I methodically laid out 3 years' worth of financial records. "Let me show you exactly who has been relying on whom," I said, my voice steady and calm. I picked up the first document. Mortgage payment to First National Bank, $2,400. Paid monthly for the last 36 months. I set it down and reached for the next paper. Electric bill, Ohio Edison Company. Average monthly payment, $187. Automatic withdrawal from my checking account for 3 years. Mom's confident expression began to falter as I continued. Water and sewer, City of Columbus. $63 monthly. Gas bill, Columbia Gas. Winter months averaging $212, summer months, $94. I placed each document carefully in front of her. Garbage collection, waste management, $41 monthly. Home insurance, State Farm. Annual premium of $1,896, paid in quarterly installments. Dad leaned forward, squinting at the papers. His face was turning pale as he recognized the addresses and account numbers. These were their bills, their house, their utilities. But my name was on every single payment authorization. This is just the beginning. I continued pulling out a thicker stack. Dad's cardiac surgery last February. Total medical bills, $12,347. Paid in full to Cleveland Clinic within 30 days to avoid interest charges. Dad's mouth fell open. He had never seen those bills. I had intercepted them and handled everything directly with the billing department. Melody started to speak, but I held up my hand. Your graduate school loans, Melody. Originally, $32,000 when you finished your master's degree. Current remaining balance, $18,412. Monthly payment, $627, automatically deducted from my account for the past 18 months. Her face crumpled as the reality hit her. She had been telling friends and colleagues about how proud she was to be managing her own finances after graduation, never knowing her big brother was covering her biggest expense. The roof repair last spring after that hailstorm. I said, laying out contractor invoices. $8,200 to Morrison Roofing, paid by cashier's check from my savings account. Brad's smugness was completely gone now. He was frantically calculating numbers in his head, and I could see the exact moment when he realized the scope of what I had been providing. I pulled up my banking app on my phone and turned the screen toward them. Scheduled payments for next week. Mortgage due December 1st, $2,400. Electric bill estimated at $203 due to increased heating usage. Water bill, $68. Gas bill, winter rates estimated $230. I scrolled through the list. Car insurance for Dad's Honda, 6-month premium, due December 15th, $497. Melody's student loan payment, $627 due December 8th. The numbers hung in the air between us like accusations. Mom was staring at the documents spread across her beautiful table setting, finally understanding that every comfort they had enjoyed, every bill that had mysteriously never arrived in their mailbox, every financial worry that had somehow resolved itself without their involvement, had been my doing. "I never asked you for a penny," I said quietly. "I never mentioned these payments. I never made you feel guilty or obligated. I just took care of things because I loved you and wanted you to be comfortable. And somehow in your mind, that translated to me being dependent on you." The emotional weight of this revelation hit them like a physical blow. 3 years of taking credit for financial stability they had never actually achieved. 3 years of judging me for living in my childhood bedroom while I was actually subsidizing their entire lifestyle. 3 years of believing they were the successful independent parents supporting their adult child when the reality was completely reversed. I left the financial documents scattered across the table like evidence at a crime scene and headed upstairs to my bedroom. "I need about 2 hours to pack my things," I announced to the silent dining room. "Please don't clean up those papers until I'm finished. You're going to need them." My childhood bedroom hadn't changed much since high school. Same blue walls, same twin bed, with the oak headboard Dad had built when I was 12. Same bookshelf filled with technical manuals and novels I had collected over the years. But now, I was packing it all up, dividing my possessions into boxes I had quietly purchased and stored in my closet over the past few weeks. As I folded clothes and wrapped picture frames in newspaper, I made the phone calls I had been mentally preparing for months. The first call went to First National Bank. "This is Willie Peterson, calling about account number 77498812. I need to remove my authorization for automatic mortgage payments effective immediately." The customer service representative asked for verification details, which I provided from memory. "Yes, I understand there will be no payment scheduled for December 1st, unless the primary account holders make alternative arrangements. Please send confirmation of this change to my email address." I could hear movement downstairs. Hushed, frantic conversations. Footsteps pacing back and forth across the kitchen floor. Someone was crying softly, probably Melody. My second call went to Ohio Edison. "I'm calling to cancel payment authorization for account number 447799211. This is Willie Peterson. I'm authorized to make changes on this account." I waited while they pulled up the records. "Effective immediately, please. Send the December bill directly to the service address on file." The conversations downstairs were getting louder. I heard Dad's voice stressed and confused, asking Mom how she had managed the mortgage payments before. Mom's voice was shaky as she tried to explain that Willie had just started helping out occasionally, but she couldn't remember when it became automatic. Ohio Gas was next. Then Waste Management. Then the Water Department. Each call was professional and polite. I explained that I would no longer be authorizing payments for the account, and they needed to resume sending bills to the property address. Each representative thanked me for my business and confirmed the changes would take effect within 1 business day. My phone rang while I was disconnecting the insurance policies. It was my cousin Janet calling from Michigan. "Willie, I just got off the phone with your mom," Janet said, her voice concerned. "She sounded really upset and was saying something about you moving out suddenly. Is everything okay? I know things have been difficult with you living at home and struggling financially." I stopped packing and sat down on my bed. "What did she tell you about my financial situation, Janet?" "Well, you know what she's been saying for months. About how you can't seem to get on your feet. How you're always asking them for help with bills and expenses. She mentioned at Tommy's graduation party that you were having trouble keeping a job and kept borrowing money for rent and groceries. Your poor parents have been so worried about you." The betrayal hit me like a punch to the chest. For months, while I had been secretly funding their entire lifestyle, Mom had been telling our extended family that I was the financial burden, that I was the one asking for help, that they were the long-suffering parents, trying to help their struggling adult son. "Janet," I said carefully, What exactly did Mom say at Tommy's graduation? She pulled me aside and was really emotional about it. Said you had been asking for loans, constantly, couldn't pay your car insurance, needed help with groceries. She was asking for advice on how to motivate you to become more independent without being too harsh. The whole family felt so bad for her having to deal with that stress. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Is there anything else she told people about my situation? Oh, honey, she's been really worried about you. She mentioned that you never contribute to household expenses, that you eat their food, and use their utilities without offering to help. She said they were considering tough love, but were afraid you might not be able to handle living on your own. Every word was like a knife. While I had been anonymously paying their bills, Mom had been painting herself as the victim of my supposed irresponsibility. She had garnered sympathy from relatives, positioned herself as the generous mother, supporting her deadbeat son, all while living entirely off my income. Janet, I need to go, I said. But please don't believe everything you hear about my situation. The truth is very different from what you've been told. I hung up and continued packing with a new sense of urgency. My suitcases filled quickly with clothes, personal documents, electronics, and the few pieces of valuable electronics I owned. Everything else, all the furniture, and random possessions accumulated over years I would leave behind. I didn't want anything that would give them a reason to contact me or demand I return. Downstairs, I could hear phone calls beginning. Dad was calling someone, probably his brother, with questions about mortgage payments and late fees. Melody was on another call, her voice high and panicked as she spoke to what sounded like her loan servicer. The reality of their situation was beginning to sink in, bill by bill, payment by payment. As I loaded the last box into my car, I realized this was the first time in 3 years that I felt truly free. No more monitoring their accounts, no more juggling payment schedules, no more secretly managing their financial crises before they even knew problems existed. Whatever happened next, they would have to handle it themselves. I was carrying my final suitcase downstairs when my phone buzzed with a text from my Uncle Mike in Cleveland. Your mom called asking for money again. Said your gambling problem got worse, and you've been stealing from them. I told her I won't enable this situation anymore. Get help, Willie. I stopped dead on the staircase, staring at the message. Gambling problem, stealing. I forwarded the text to my cousin Janet and called her immediately. Janet, you need to see this message I just got from Uncle Mike, I said when she answered. And I need to know exactly what Mom has been telling everyone about me. There was a long pause before Janet responded. Willie, maybe I shouldn't have said anything. Your mom was probably just venting her frustrations. Please, Janet, I need to understand what's been going on behind my back. She sighed heavily. At the family reunion in July, your mom pulled several of us aside. She was crying, saying you had developed a gambling addiction and were taking money from their savings account without permission. She said they had discovered missing funds and confronted you, but you denied it and became angry and defensive. My hands were shaking as I absorbed this information. What else? She said they were considering changing their bank account passwords because money kept disappearing. Small amounts at first, but then larger withdrawals. She was asking if anyone had experience dealing with addiction in the family, whether we thought an intervention would help. Janet's voice was getting smaller as she spoke. Willie, if this isn't true, then why would she say these things? I walked into the living room where my family was still sitting around the dining table, staring at the financial documents I had left behind. They looked up as I entered, their faces a mixture of shame and desperation. Mom, I said, putting my phone on speaker. I just received some interesting information about conversations you've had with our relatives. Janet, can you repeat what you just told me? Janet's voice filled the room through my phone speaker, describing in detail the stories Mom had told the family. The gambling addiction, the theft from their savings, the missing money, the supposed denial and defensiveness when confronted. As Janet spoke, Mom's face went through a progression of expressions: surprise, panic, guilt, and finally resignation. Dad stared at his wife in horror. Patricia, you told people Willie was stealing from us while he was paying our mortgage. I didn't mean, Mom started, but her voice cracked, and she couldn't continue. Melody stood up from her chair, her face flushed with anger. Mom, how could you lie like that about Willie? He's been supporting all of us, and you made our entire family think he was a thief and an addict. Brad was shaking his head in disbelief. This is unbelievable. Willie, I am so sorry. I had no idea she was saying these things about you. I ended the call with Janet and looked directly at Mom. Why? Why would you destroy my reputation with our family while I was secretly keeping you financially afloat? Mom broke down, completely sobbing into her hands. Between gasps, she tried to explain. I was embarrassed. People kept asking how we could afford the house, the new car, your father's medical bills. I didn't know how to explain that my son was supporting us. It made me feel like a failure as a parent. So you decided to make me look like the failure instead? I asked. I thought if I made it seem like you were the problem, people would stop asking questions about our finances. I never thought about how it would affect you. I just wanted to maintain our image as a successful family. Dad's voice was quiet and filled with shame. Patricia, do you realize what you've done? Our entire family thinks Willie is an addict and a thief. His reputation is ruined because of your lies. I can fix it, Mom said desperately. I'll call everyone back. I'll tell them the truth. I'll explain everything. I picked up my phone and put it back in my pocket. The damage is done, Mom. You spent months systematically destroying my character to cover up your embarrassment about needing help. You turned my generosity into a weapon against my own reputation. The weight of her deception settled over the room like a toxic cloud. Not only had she taken my financial support for granted, but she had actively used it as cover to portray me as everything I wasn't: irresponsible, addicted, dishonest, and parasitic. She had converted my kindness into ammunition for her own social insecurity. Melody was crying now, understanding the full scope of what had happened. Willie, I believed some of those stories. When Mom said you were having problems, I thought that's why you were living at home. I actually felt sorry for her having to deal with your supposed issues. The realization that even my own sister had believed the lies about me was devastating. My mother hadn't just lied to distant relatives. She had poisoned the well of trust within our immediate family. Every interaction we had shared over the past months had been tainted by her deception. I need to finish packing, I said quietly. And you need to figure out how you're going to handle your bills starting next week. As I headed back upstairs, I heard Mom's voice behind me, weak and desperate. Willie, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but we're family. We can work through this. I didn't turn around. Family doesn't lie about each other to manipulate other people's perceptions. Family doesn't take secret financial support and then claim the supporter is actually a burden. You broke something that can't be fixed with apologies. I was loading the last of my belongings into my car when the first real consequence arrived in the form of Dad's ringing cell phone. He answered on the third ring, and I could hear the conversation from the driveway. Mr. Peterson, this is Amanda from First National Bank, calling about your mortgage account ending in 812. We received notification that your automatic payment authorization has been canceled, and your December payment of $2,400 is now due within 48 hours to avoid late fees. Dad's voice was confused and panicked. I don't understand. Our payments are automatic. There must be some mistake. Sir, the authorization was canceled this afternoon by Willie Peterson, who was listed as the payment source for this account. You'll need to make alternative payment arrangements immediately. Would you like to set up a new automatic withdrawal from a different account? Dad looked helplessly at Mom through the kitchen window. We need to call you back. Can you hold the payment deadline until we figure this out? I can give you until close of business Friday, but after that, you'll incur a late fee of $125, and the missed payment will be reported to credit agencies. Dad hung up and stared at his phone like it was a foreign object. He had never handled their mortgage. He didn't even know which bank held their loan until this conversation. For 3 years, he had simply assumed the payments were being managed somehow, without questioning the details. Before he could process this information completely, Mom's phone rang. It was an automated message from Ohio Edison. This call is to notify you that your account ending in 211 has an outstanding balance of $203. Payment is due by Monday, December 2nd, or electric service will be disconnected. Please call our customer service number to make payment arrangements. Mom frantically wrote down the phone number, but when she called back, she realized she didn't know their account number password or any of the details needed to access their account. I had been managing everything electronically for so long that no physical bills had come to their house in years. Melody's phone buzzed with a text message from her student loan servicer. Payment authorization declined. Your December payment of $627 is past due. Please contact us immediately to avoid default status. She called the number with shaking hands. This is Melody Thompson calling about my student loans. I got a message saying my payment was declined. The customer service representative pulled up her account. Ms. Thompson, the automatic payment from Willie Peterson's account was canceled today. You're now responsible for making payments directly. Your account is currently 15 days past due, which means you need to make an immediate payment of $627, plus a late fee of $25. 15 days past due, but Willie has been paying it automatically. Ma'am, our records show the last successful payment was November 8th. Today is November 28th. You're responsible for ensuring your payments are made regardless of who makes them on your behalf. Melody hung up and started crying. She didn't have $652 available in her checking account. She didn't have it available anywhere. Her income barely covered her rent and basic expenses, which is why Willie had been handling the student loans in the first place. Brad tried to take control of the situation. Okay, everyone calm down. Let's figure out how much money we actually need and see if we can pool our resources. They gathered around the kitchen table with calculators and bank statements. The numbers were devastating. Mortgage, $2,400. Electric, $203. Gas estimated $230. Water, $68. Student loan, $652, including late fees. Total immediate needs $3,553. Dad's checking account had $412. Mom had been staying home for 15 years and had no independent income. Melody and Brad's combined checking accounts totaled $1,096. Even if they emptied every account they had access to, they were still short over $2,000. What about savings? Brad asked desperately. Dad checked their joint savings account on his phone app. $837. Adding everything together, their total available resources were $2,345. They were still over $1,200 short of covering just their immediate bills. And this didn't account for food, gasoline, other utilities, or any of the dozens of smaller expenses that Willie had been quietly managing. We need to call Willie back, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. He'll help us figure this out. He wouldn't just abandon us completely. Dad looked at her with a mixture of exhaustion and anger. Patricia, you just spent the last hour learning that Willie has been secretly supporting us for 3 years, while you told our entire family he was stealing from us. Why exactly do you think he owes us anything now? The reality of their situation was settling over them, like a suffocating blanket. They had been living a lifestyle they couldn't afford, funded by someone they had taken for granted, and systematically lied about. And now, with less than 48 hours to avoid serious financial consequences, they were discovering just how far beyond their means they had been living. I finished loading my car and walked back to the front door one last time. The family was still huddled around the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and bank statements, trying to solve an impossible math problem. They looked up as I entered, their faces desperate and pleading. Willie, Dad said, his voice breaking slightly. We understand now. We understand what you've been doing for us and we're grateful. But we need your help just one more time, just until we can figure out how to handle things ourselves." I looked at each of them: Dad, who had never questioned where their financial stability came from; Mom, who had lied about me to protect her own ego; Melody, who had been proud of her independence while I secretly funded it; and Brad, who had smugly judged my living situation without knowing I was subsidizing his. "You'll figure it out," I said simply. "Because you'll have to." As I started my car engine, I could see through the kitchen window that the family had moved into full crisis mode. Dad was on his phone, making what appeared to be increasingly desperate calls. I pulled out of the driveway, slowly watching in my rearview mirror as the house where I had lived for 28 years disappeared behind me. But my phone started ringing before I reached the end of our street. It was Uncle Mike calling back. "Willie, your dad just called me asking for a loan," Uncle Mike said without preamble. "He's saying there was some kind of misunderstanding about your situation, and they need help with their mortgage payment. But your mom called me 3 hours ago, telling me you had stolen money from them again. I'm confused here, son. What's really going on?" I pulled over and explained everything to Uncle Mike. The 3 years of financial support, the lies Mom had told about gambling and theft, the complete reversal of who was actually dependent on whom. Uncle Mike listened in stunned silence. "Jesus Christ, Willie. Your mother told me last month that you had taken $800 from their savings account for gambling debts. She was crying, asking if I thought they should kick you out or try to get you into counseling first." My stomach turned. "Uncle Mike, I've never gambled in my life. I've never taken a penny from their accounts. I've only put money in." "I know that now, son. And I feel sick about it. I turned down your dad's request for help because I thought I would be enabling your supposed addiction. Your mother has poisoned the well with the entire family." After hanging up with Uncle Mike, my phone rang again. This time, it was Aunt Susan from Indianapolis. "Willie, honey, I just got the strangest call from your sister. She's saying you've been paying their bills all along, and your mom made up stories about you having problems that doesn't make sense. Your mom called me last week, asking for advice about setting boundaries with you." And then, my cousin David from Pittsburgh. "Dude, what is happening with your family? Your dad called asking for money, but your mom spent 20 minutes at Grandma's funeral, telling everyone how you were stealing from them. Which story is true?" Each call revealed another layer of Mom's systematic campaign to destroy my reputation. She had told Aunt Susan that I was emotionally manipulative and would fly into rages when confronted about money. She had told Cousin David that I had threatened to hurt myself if they kicked me out. She had told Grandma before she passed away 2 months ago that I was involved with dangerous people because of gambling debts. Every relative who called had a different version of my supposed problems, but they all had one thing in common: Mom positioning herself as the victim of my behavior while secretly living off my income. She had created an elaborate fictional narrative about my life to cover up her embarrassment about needing help. Meanwhile, back at the house, the family's attempts to solve their financial crisis were revealing even more uncomfortable truths. Melody had called her loan servicer to try to set up a payment plan, only to discover that she had another defaulted student loan from her undergraduate degree that Willie didn't know about. She had been hiding this default for 2 years, which explained why her credit score was too low to qualify for any new loans or payment modifications. Dad had contacted their mortgage company to try to negotiate an extension, but learned that Willie was listed as a partial owner of the house due to his payment contributions over the years. The bank wouldn't discuss payment arrangements without Willie's signature, effectively giving him veto power over any modifications to their mortgage. Brad had tried to apply for a personal loan to cover their immediate expenses, but his credit application was rejected within minutes. His income as a retail supervisor wasn't sufficient to qualify for the amount they needed, and his existing credit card debt was higher than he had admitted to Melody. By evening, they had exhausted every possible solution except the one they were all thinking, but nobody wanted to say out loud. They would have to drastically downsize their lifestyle. Sell the house, Move to a smaller, cheaper place. Find additional income sources. Live within their actual means for the first time in 3 years. Mom sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and rejection letters, finally understanding the scope of what she had lost. Not just Willie's financial support, but his trust, his presence in their family, and his willingness to help them through difficulties. She had traded all of that for the temporary comfort of maintaining her image among relatives who now knew the truth anyway. "I need to call everyone back," she said to Dad. "Every person I lied to about Willie. I need to tell them the truth and apologize." "That won't bring him back," Dad replied sadly. "And it won't solve our financial problems. We're going to have to figure this out ourselves, Patricia. Just like we should have been doing all along." The weight of their new reality was crushing. They were about to lose everything Willie had quietly protected them from: financial stress, difficult decisions, lifestyle sacrifices, and the hard work of living responsibly within their means. All because Mom couldn't handle the social discomfort of admitting they needed help. As night fell, they were still sitting around the same table where this had all started at Thanksgiving dinner. But now, instead of turkey and gratitude, they were surrounded by bills they couldn't pay and consequences they couldn't avoid. The comfortable life they had taken for granted was ending, and their son, who had made it all possible, was gone. I drove across Columbus to the apartment complex I had secretly rented 2 months earlier. Riverside Gardens was a modern development with clean lines, updated appliances, and a beautiful view of the Scioto River. I had been gradually moving my most important possessions here for weeks, preparing for this inevitable moment. My new place was a 1-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, furnished with pieces I had been buying gradually and having delivered when the family was out. A comfortable couch, a dining table that actually fit my height, a bed that was bigger than the twin I had slept in since childhood. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by things I had chosen specifically for my own comfort and preferences. The freedom was intoxicating. I opened my refrigerator and found food I had purchased for myself: Greek yogurt, fresh salmon, organic vegetables, craft beer from a local brewery I enjoyed. No more sharing meals planned around everyone else's preferences and dietary restrictions. No more calculating whether I could afford to buy something I wanted because I needed to save money for their mortgage payment. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls from various family members, but I had turned the ringer off and was letting everything go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to engage with their crisis. Instead, I called my supervisor, Jennifer, to accept the promotion offer I had been declining for 3 months. "Willie, this is unexpected," Jennifer said when I explained I wanted to take the Denver position. "You've been turning down advancement opportunities for over a year. What changed?" "My family situation has resolved itself," I said simply. "I'm free to relocate now, and I'm excited about the challenge." "Wonderful. The position starts January 15th and comes with a 15% salary increase, plus relocation assistance. I'll email you the paperwork tomorrow." A 15% raise. In Denver, where I knew nobody and owed nobody anything. Where I could build a life based entirely on my own choices and priorities. The thought made me smile for the first time in months. I spent the evening setting up my home office space and researching neighborhoods in Denver. I found a hiking club that met every weekend, a volunteer organization that taught coding to underprivileged kids, and several restaurants that looked amazing. I was already making plans for a life that belonged completely to me. Meanwhile, across town, my family was learning exactly how much work went into maintaining the lifestyle they had taken for granted. Dad had spent 4 hours on the phone with various utility companies, trying to understand billing cycles, payment options, and account access procedures. Everything Willie had managed seamlessly required hours of navigation through automated phone systems and customer service representatives. Mom had started the painful process of calling relatives to confess her lies. Each conversation was more humiliating than the last, as she had to explain not only that Willie was innocent of all her accusations, but that he had actually been supporting them financially while she was destroying his reputation. Aunt Susan had been particularly brutal. "Patricia, I can't believe you would lie about your own son like that. And while he was paying your bills. What kind of mother does that? I need some time to process this before we talk again." Uncle Mike was more direct. "Patricia, you've damaged that boy's reputation with the entire family. Some of the things you said about him were character assassination. I don't know how you live with yourself." Each call reinforced the magnitude of her betrayal. She hadn't just lied about Willie's behavior. She had systematically turned family members against him while he was unknowingly supporting their ability to maintain their lifestyle and social standing. Melody and Brad had spent their evening at a financial counseling service where a patient advisor had walked them through the mathematics of their situation. The numbers were stark. Their household expenses exceeded their household income by approximately $1,800 per month. They had been living 18 months ahead of their actual earning power, funded entirely by Willie's generosity. "You have 3 options," the counselor had explained. "Drastically increase your income, drastically decrease your expenses, or face bankruptcy within 6 months. There's no middle ground here." The advisor had helped them create a realistic budget that required selling the house, moving to a rental apartment, and both Dad and Mom returning to work immediately. Even then, they would need to eliminate most discretionary spending and live with a level of financial constraint they hadn't experienced in years. By 10 o'clock that night, the family was emotionally and financially exhausted. They sat in their living room surrounded by financial documents and harsh realities, finally understanding what Willie's quiet support had actually meant to their lives. Not just money, but freedom from worry, from difficult decisions, from the daily work of managing a household responsibly. Dad broke the silence first. "I keep thinking about how he never mentioned any of this. 3 years of paying our mortgage, and he never once made us feel guilty about it or asked for gratitude. He was protecting us," Melody said quietly. "From stress, from embarrassment, from having to make hard choices. And I never even thanked him." Mom was staring at her hands, tears flowing steadily down her cheeks. "I destroyed the relationship with the best person in our family. I turned his kindness into a weapon against him because I was too proud to admit we needed help." The house felt different without Willie's presence. Emptier. Not just because he was physically gone, but because the foundation of security and stability he had provided was gone too. They were finally seeing their lives clearly for the first time in 3 years, and the view was sobering. They had lost more than financial support. They had lost someone who loved them enough to sacrifice his own comfort for their well-being, without expecting recognition or gratitude. And they had lost him not through any external crisis or unavoidable circumstance, but through their own taking him for granted, and Mom's deliberate cruelty in lying about him to others. As they turned off the lights and headed to bed, each family member was facing the same realization: their old life was over, and the new one would require them to be people they had never had to be before. Responsible, independent, honest about their limitations, and most painfully living with the knowledge that they had driven away the person who had loved them most. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book I never wanted to read before. Denver welcomed me with snow-capped mountains and air so clean it made me realize how stale my old life had become. My new position at Tech Solutions involved leading a team of developers working on financial software for small businesses. The irony wasn't lost on me, helping other people manage their finances responsibly after spending years enabling my family's irresponsibility. My condo in the Highlands neighborhood had enormous windows facing the mountains and a small balcony where I grew herbs in containers. Every morning, I made coffee and watched the sunrise paint the peaks different shades of gold and pink. I had joined the Colorado Mountain Club and spent weekends hiking trails with names like Devil's Head and Mount Elbert. For the first time in my adult life, my weekends belonged entirely to me. The hiking group had introduced me to Sarah, a third-grade teacher, who shared my love of outdoor adventures and terrible puns. She was independently successful splitting dinner checks without thinking about it, and insisting we alternate who planned our weekend activities. When I offered to pay for her climbing gear, she laughed and said she preferred to buy her own equipment. Dating someone who expected equality, rather than dependence, felt revolutionary. My phone still received occasional updates from relatives about my family's situation. They had sold the house in January and moved into a modest 3-bedroom rental in a different part of Columbus. Dad had returned to work part-time, doing consulting for his old engineering firm, grateful that his former colleagues still respected his expertise, despite his health limitations. His doctor said the mental stimulation and sense of purpose had actually improved his recovery from the heart surgery. Mom had surprised everyone by finding employment at a nonprofit organization focused on literacy programs. She discovered she had a talent for grant writing and donor relation skills she had developed during years of managing household social obligations. The work gave her a sense of contribution she hadn't felt in 15 years of staying home. Her first paycheck had made her cry, not because the amount was large, but because she had earned it herself. Melody and Brad had moved into a smaller apartment and were gradually paying down their debts. The crisis had forced them to communicate more honestly about money, and their marriage had actually strengthened as they learned to face challenges together instead of relying on external bailouts. Melody had discovered she qualified for income-based repayment on her student loans, reducing her monthly obligation to something manageable within their actual budget. Most importantly, they had all learned to live within their means. No more financial mysteries or bills that magically disappeared. No more lifestyle funded by hidden subsidies. They checked their bank balances before making purchases, planned meals around grocery store sales, and felt genuine pride when they successfully managed their expenses each month. In March, I received a letter that changed everything. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter on Mom's personal stationery. The envelope was thick, containing several pages of her careful cursive handwriting. Dear Willie, it began, I know I have no right to expect you to read this, but I need to try to explain what I've learned about myself and what our family has learned about living honestly. She described the humbling experience of calling every relative to confess her lies and apologize. Several family members had initially refused to believe her, assuming this was another manipulation. Uncle Mike had demanded she send written apologies to everyone she had slandered me to, which she had done. Aunt Susan still wouldn't speak to her directly, communicating only through Dad when necessary for family events. I told those lies because I was ashamed of needing help, she wrote. I thought, if I could make you seem like the problem, people would stop noticing that we couldn't actually afford our lifestyle. I convinced myself that you would never know what I was saying to relatives, so it wouldn't hurt you directly. I was wrong about everything. The letter described how they had learned to appreciate things they had previously taken for granted. Dad's excitement about his first consulting paycheck. Mom's pride in contributing to their rent payment. Melody's growing confidence as she successfully managed her own finances. They weren't just surviving without my support. They were thriving in ways they had never experienced while dependent on my subsidies. We don't need your money anymore, Mom wrote in closing. We've learned to take care of ourselves just like you always knew we could. But we miss you, Willie. We miss your laugh at Sunday dinners and your terrible jokes during movie nights. We miss having our son and brother in our lives. If you ever decide you want to be part of this family again, we promise it will be different. You'll be welcomed as our loved one, not our secret benefactor. The letter included a photo of their new home, smaller, simpler, but clearly maintained with care and pride. Dad was in the front yard planting flowers. Mom was on the porch holding a coffee mug, and Melody was visible through a window, apparently cooking. They looked content in a way I hadn't seen in years. I kept the letter on my kitchen counter for 2 weeks, reading it periodically, while deciding how to respond. Sarah found me reading it one evening and asked about my family situation. I told her the entire story from the Thanksgiving confrontation, through the financial revelations to my move to Denver. They hurt you deeply, Sarah said after I finished. But it sounds like they've learned from their mistakes in a real way. The question is whether you've healed enough to consider letting them back into your life. I realized she was right. My anger had faded months ago, replaced by something closer to sadness about time lost and relationships damaged. But the sadness was mixed with respect for how they had handled their crisis. They could have collapsed into helplessness or resentment. Instead, they had chosen growth, responsibility, and honest change. In April, I called Dad. The conversation was awkward at first, both of us uncertain about boundaries and expectations. But gradually, we found our rhythm, talking about his work, my hiking adventures, the weather in our respective cities. Normal conversation between father and son, without the underlying tension of hidden financial dynamics. Willie, Dad said before we hung up, I want you to know that we talk about you every day. Not about money or what you did for us financially, but about missing your presence in our lives. Your mom keeps your place set at Sunday dinner, even though we know you're not coming. Habit, I guess, but also hope. That conversation opened the door to regular phone calls with different family members. Melody sent photos of meals she had successfully cooked without burning. Mom shared updates about her work projects and the satisfaction of earning her own money. Each interaction felt genuine in a way our previous relationships hadn't, because there were no hidden agendas or unspoken financial obligations. In June, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called Mom and told her I wanted to visit for the 4th of July weekend. Are you sure? She asked, her voice carefully controlled. We would love to see you, but only if you're genuinely ready. We don't want to pressure you into anything. I'm ready, I said. But I want to be clear about something. I'm coming as your son who loves you, not as someone who might resume financial support. This visit is about family relationships, nothing else. Willie, we don't want your money, Mom said firmly. We want our son back. The weekend visit exceeded my expectations. Their rental house was small but welcoming, decorated with furniture they had chosen within their budget, and maintained with obvious care. The meals were simpler than the elaborate spreads from previous years, but they had been prepared together as a family, with everyone contributing according to their abilities. Most remarkably, the conversations were honest. Dad talked about the challenges and rewards of working again. Mom described learning to budget and the pride she felt in contributing to household expenses. Melody shared how managing her own finances had given her confidence she had never experienced while depending on external support. They asked about my life in Denver, my work, my relationship with Sarah, my hiking adventures. They listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions and remembering details from previous conversations. For the first time in years, I felt like they saw me as a complete person, rather than a financial resource. On Sunday evening, as I prepared to fly back to Denver, Mom pulled me aside for a private conversation. Willie, I need you to know that losing you was the worst consequence of my lies and selfishness. Worse than the financial stress, worse than the family embarrassment, worse than having to completely change our lifestyle. I damaged my relationship with the person who loved us most, and I'll regret that forever. Mom, I said, what matters is what we choose to do going forward. You've all proven you can take care of yourselves and live honestly. That makes me proud of you. 6 months later, I was back in Ohio for a very different kind of family gathering. Sarah and I had gotten engaged in October, and I wanted my family to meet the woman who had taught me what healthy relationships looked like. We planned a simple celebration dinner at a restaurant everyone could afford, with costs split equitably among all the adults. The dinner was wonderful. Sarah and Melody bonded over their shared experience of managing student loans. Dad and Sarah discussed educational policy and its impact on teachers. Mom asked thoughtful questions about Sarah's work and genuinely listened to her responses. Everyone contributed to the conversation, and nobody dominated or monopolized attention. When the check arrived, Dad automatically reached for his wallet to cover his and Mom's portion. Melody and Brad calculated their share, including tip. I offered to pay for Sarah and myself. It was a small moment, but it represented everything that had changed each person, taking responsibility for their own obligations, contributing what they could, and participating as equals, rather than dependents or benefactors. As we said goodbye in the restaurant parking lot, I realized something important had been restored. Not the relationship we'd had before, which had been built on hidden financial dynamics and unspoken resentments. Instead, we had built something new. Relationships based on genuine affection, mutual respect, and honest communication. The old Willie had been trapped in a cycle of enabling dependence and hiding his resentment about being taken for granted. The old family had been trapped in a lifestyle they couldn't afford maintained through lies and willful ignorance about their financial reality. Everyone had grown. Dad had rediscovered his professional confidence and the satisfaction of contributing to his household. Mom had found independence and self-respect through earning her own money and living honestly. Melody had developed financial responsibility and the pride that comes from managing her own life successfully. And I had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is stop enabling their dependence, forcing them to discover their own strength and capability. True family relationships must be built on mutual respect and equality, not financial obligation or guilt. The boy who had quietly paid everyone's bills while being portrayed as a burden was gone. In his place was a man who understood that healthy love requires boundaries, that generosity without appreciation becomes resentment, and that the people you care about sometimes need to struggle in order to grow. 6 months after our reconciliation, Sarah and I were married in a small ceremony in Denver, with my family in attendance. They had saved money for months to afford the trip, and their presence meant more to me because I knew they had earned it themselves. Dad gave a speech about second chances and the importance of building relationships on truth rather than convenience. Mom cried happy tears while helping Sarah with her dress. As I danced with my new wife at our reception, surrounded by family members who had learned to live honestly and friends who knew our real story, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any financial success or career achievement. We had all learned to be better people through crisis and separation and the hard work of rebuilding trust. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to rescue them from the consequences of their choices, allowing them to discover they're stronger than they knew. Sometimes walking away is the most loving thing you can do, because it creates space for growth that would be impossible while enabling dependence. My family had needed to learn they could take care of themselves. I had needed to learn that my worth wasn't measured by my ability to solve other people's problems. And together, we had all learned that the strongest relationships are built on choice rather than obligation, on appreciation rather than assumption, and on the mutual respect that comes from each person contributing what they can while taking responsibility for their own life. The ending was better than I had dared to hope for, not just reconciliation, but transformation. Not just forgiveness, but growth. Not just family reunited, but family rebuilt on a foundation strong enough to last. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to step back from helping someone you love because you realized your help was actually preventing them from growing? Sometimes the people we care about most need to face their own challenges to discover their true strength. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and the sometimes difficult journey toward personal growth. Share this with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries doesn't mean you love someone less. Sometimes it means you love them enough to let them succeed on their own. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you think about the relationships in your own life. Remember that the strongest families are built on honesty, mutual respect, and the courage to do what's right even when it's difficult. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.